Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in to watching our films in the digital platform. And we hope you've enjoyed the festival, and we hope you enjoyed the screening of Lo Invisible. My name is Diana Cadavid, and I'm part of the programming team at the festival and the programmer for today's film. And it is with great pleasure that I want to introduce you to Javier Andrade, the director of Lo Invisible. Welcome, Javier.
Hi everybody. Thank you for having me.
Well, this is very exciting. Thank you for sharing your film with us. This is the first Ecuadorian film that we have in the festival in more than 20 years. So it's very exciting to have you. And I wanted to start our conversation by asking you about the process of creating the film. How did you come with, of course, like with the idea, but also how did you start working on it?
Well, first of all, thank you, Diana. Thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be having a world premiere at Tiff. We're actually quite excited about this. The origin of the project, like an easy, I guess, way to explain it is it's a twofold kind of thing. On one hand, I really wanted to work on a project that was very different than my first fiction film, which was called Porcelain Horse. So I wanted to set myself some rules. I wanted to have a female protagonist. I wanted it to be in Ecuador, but I wanted to be in the highlands of Ecuador, which is where I live. Previous film was made in the coast, and it had a very sort of, in a way, aggressive, in-your-face visual language. I wanted to try something more restrained, and I also wanted to try and adapt, I guess, a feeling or a sensation that came to me from a painting, a specific painting I saw in a museum that moved me a lot. That painting is called Before the Mirror by Edouard Manet. I think it's a MoMA. It was a MoMA that I saw in New York, and there was something about it's a portrait of a woman. You don't see her face, but you see that she's wearing a very elegant dress, and somehow you see that she's trapped, like she's in a cage, in a somewhat beautiful cage. So I really liked the feeling of that painting, and I was already on this sort of search for an alternative or a different style of story than my first film. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, I really wanted to collaborate with Anahí Hoeneisen and her husband, who's the DP of this film, called Javier Andrade, with whom I had worked before. I had edited a film for them, and we had gotten along great. We had a great creative process. So this felt like an interesting opportunity to do both those things, to try both those ideas, collaborating with these people that I really was hoping to do, and also to try and explore this sort of subject matter and a style of story.
I love that you mentioned, like the elegance, but also like the feeling, like that idea of feeling trapped, because I think that's captured very well in the film. Like when I was watching it, that's a lot of what I felt. That was like, this is so elegant and so beautifully like framed, but at the same time, like the character feels so trapped, like in the house, in her universe. Can you tell us how was the collaboration with Anahí, particularly like because she was involved in the writing process and then she's the star of the film as well. um how did you work together in the writing and then like in like directing her?
Yeah, well, the first thing was, again, I proposed to them to collaborate. I showed them a couple of images. I showed them this one painting that had moved me very much, and then we decided to try and write with Anahí the way a tailor would make a dress for somebody. Like we would try and write something that would be interesting for her to explore, and that would be showcases in quite the right word, but something that would display her acting strengths, which I think are quite considerable. So that was the first thing, and I think she really liked the opportunity to explore something that's a little sort of on the darker side of things. It's not something she had done before, so she was excited about it, and she's somebody who's, I would say, without vanity and full of compromise, not compromise, but commitment, rather, to a role. So once she took on the idea, we just sort of went out and found the most challenging and appealing part for us. So that was, I guess, the first sort of thing. In the writing per se, we started writing together, and that was really clumsy. That didn't really work, but we really liked what we were doing. We really liked the ideas. We really liked the direction the film was taking. So what we decided to do was to create a different system, which is we would discuss the scenes that we wanted. We would write down sort of we call that in Spanish an escaleta. I guess in English is a beat sheet, just an outline, very simple outline. And then she would go and work on that, and then I would polish from that. And then we would do the next section of the script with another outline that I would draft, and then she would polish. And that started to work really, really well. It was also interesting that we would show each other films and books, and just to get it was very interesting because we never were trying to either emulate or copy anything, but we were really looking for atmospheres because we were trying to make a movie that had a very strong atmosphere. So it was like this atmosphere works. So to me, I remember that because that took us to places that were very sort of unexpected for us. For instance, books. Like Anahí showed me a short story that I didn't know, that if you don't know, I recommend you read because it's great. It's called El Árbol, called The Tree. It's a Chilean short story by Maria Luisa Bombal, who's a writer, very interesting writer. But the atmosphere, again, that she described in the short story was something that we thought could be fun to try and dramatize in cinematic form. And for me, I remember it was I was reading for the first time Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which I had never read, and I thought it was incredibly visual and incredibly internal. But she was writing in images the internal process of Mrs. Dalloway. So I figured again this atmosphere, if we could adapt somehow this atmosphere to the film, we would be on our way. So that was sort of what started feeding this process.
This is a film that has very little plot, which is something that I really enjoyed when watching it. That it's definitely something that it's way more that you connect with it as an audience in a more emotional level than like following a lot of story. Was this also something that you set out to do from the beginning, or it came during the writing process that's kind of like how it was going to go?
That's a really good question. It's kind of both. I remember we thinking, because I was really obsessed with the idea of having a very subjective film, having a film that is told in the first person, first narrative person, as in literature, as it happens in literature, which is kind of hard to do with film, obviously, because film really works on on the third person with point of view of the main character, but also switching. On this one, we were like, how far it was sort of a game of how far can we take the story into the main character's subjectivity and inner world. So that was that. Once we decided to go in that direction, we realized we couldn't tell a lot of story. I don't know if that makes sense. We just couldn't switch. You know what I mean? In a different movie or a movie with more third person point of view, we would go to the husband, for instance, or we would go to a bit more to the life of the staff, the driver or the piano teacher, these different characters. Once we set out to do it from Luisa's point of view and really try and shoot it and live it through her skin, that limited the scope of the story. So it was almost like it became almost like a little puzzle of this piece can really fit into how Luisa sees the world, but this piece, which would be key in a different film or a different type of narrative, can't really work here. So that lended us to a very sort of thin story of quite intensity and quite profound. I think a quite profound emotion. So that took us there. The point of view really took us there.
And so, um, after your exploration with the film,
Mhm.
I guess like you've had like a lot of conversations about mental health and the perception of mental health, particularly like in the female, like the female psyche and the female body and the way it is like so pushed and manipulated by society in many ways.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was wondering, yeah, like what, like after, like this process of making the film, what has stayed with you in terms of that, like thinking of about mental health in women particularly.
When we started, I guess this goes back to those first conversations, which really the entire film sprung out of those initial talks. It was interesting to have this idea of the cage, of the very elegant cage, and then the cage of the mind, and it gave us immediately an idea of an ending. It's kind of funny. We had the ending sort of right away, not in shape, not in exactly how it was going to play out, but we decided very early that the movie was going to end in the character's head. That it was really, we were going to get lost with her in her mind. And that led us to think about really depression, which is something I have dealt with in my past, and I have people around, people close to me who have dealt with it. So it was an interesting point for me to really try and tackle and to dramatize cinematically. But once Anahí got in and we decided that it was going to be her and that she was going to be the main character, we started talking about something that would happen particularly to females. And then postpartum depression became a thing that to us was very interesting as a trigger to be in somebody's mind, be in somebody's sort of dark space and see if we could create quiet tension through that. So it was both something that concerned us very much, but it was also a very interesting device because, again, going back to this idea of point of view, once we decided the point of view of the film was going to be so sort of limited to her and her experience, the idea of postpartum depression and the baby became the inciting incident. Only in this particular film, the inciting incident happens off camera. It happens. I mean, she did something to the baby, and she went off to this place, and now she's come back home, and home isn't home anymore. So it allowed us to deal with something very concrete and very painful, like depression and postpartum depression, but in a poetic way.
With that in mind, particularly like when you talk about like the point of view and how important like that decision was in like setting the mood for the film,
Yeah.
um I'm very curious about the other characters and the process of like finding the actors or finding the people that were going to
Mhm.
play them, and how you were able to introduce them into this universe. um I think it plays a very important role in the film because of like the class issues that the film also exposes. So
Yeah, well, when we started writing her, we were writing Luisa. We started writing her world. We really wanted the movie to take place in one large space, and the movie does largely takes place in that house. And then we just started thinking who could populate that house. And in the highlands of Ecuador, La Sierra, as we call it, as in all of Latin America, there's a large indigenous population that historically have served as servants of one kind of another. This is an inheritance from the hacienda, the whole idea of hacienda. So this is something that has happened, particularly in the highlands for, I don't know, 300 or 400 years. And we were thinking, what if she had a nanny? How do we address this? How do we make this without making it overtly political, but more like a portrait of how class happens, or how class divisions are still in place in Latin America. So we really like the idea of the warmest possible relation that Luisa has, for it to be with a nanny and have the nanny be of indigenous origin, because it seemed to be the most truthful in terms of that character in that position. So that was the first choice. And there's a great story about how we found her. We found her, Matilde, the great Matilde Lagos. She was just the greatest surprise for us. She was dancing. She dances at a community center for elder adults, for adultos mayores, we say here, senior citizens. So Anahí, who also handled a lot of the casting, decided that because we wanted a non-actor of indigenous origin, and we found her through that. And I went to see her, and she told me, "Well, you have to see this lady. I mean, she's amazing. She didn't have any acting experience, but she had a lot of performance experience." So that's how she came around. And with her, we actually rewrote. I don't want to sort of misrepresent this, but my feeling, my recollection is that we rewrote all of the scenes for her to see how she would play them, because obviously she's a non-actor and she had a style of doing things that we really liked, but we didn't want to impose sort of the film reality into her reality. So we sort of gave up on shaping the scenes to her and rather have her fulfill a simple objective in the scene, like, consoling Luisa, or, massaging her feet and then saying the lines. And that was wonderful. The rest of the cast, most of them are from theater, from local theater here, and very strong actor friends. And then the girl who plays Dani, her name is Paola Navarrete, who sings the song at the end of in the credits, not the song that Matilde sings, but the song of the credits. And Paola it's quite a force of the indie music scene down here. And I knew her as a singer, but we wanted her to be in the film because we thought she would be an intense antagonistic figure for Luisa without having to really write a confrontation, a sort of a very strong confrontation scene, but a subtle confrontation scene like the one that's in the film now. So more or less, that's how we found it. It was a mix and match of styles and types.
That's fantastic. And we just have time for one more question. So I guess I
Sure.
would love to like close the conversation asking you about like how was the process of finishing the film? Like how did you approach editing and sound design? I found the sound design is like very precise,
Yeah.
especially because it's like so quiet. Like it depends a lot on like the world that's created to sound. And also, how do you expect a little like the film to be received in Ecuador, particularly?
Well, thank you. Well, it's nice that you thought of the sound design, because we worked on it very, very hard. I'll start there because it's what's most fresh in my mind. We
Mhm.
did it with Juan Jose Luzuriaga, who did my previous film, and who's a sort of the top sound designer down here. And in the mix, both in the mix and in the sound design, again, we wanted to enhance this subjective experience. So since we were working with scope lenses, but with a 50 and an 85, we didn't use any wide lenses on this particular film to, in a way, limit her perspective, her visual perspective. We figured we could amplify and distort the sound perspective. So we played a lot with off-camera
Mhm.
situations, and also sort of distorting sounds from her perspective that isn't from a perspective that isn't quite there for her. She's really, she's in and out of a very strange days. So we decided to try and turn that into sound as much as we could. So that was one thing. And in the mix, we actually removed some dialogue and re-added. We rewrote a couple of little scenes to enhance. In the final mix, this was stressful because we had no time. It was like, we need to add this dialogue or change the sound to, again, deepen the sensation of being through the hole or the labyrinth of her mind. So that was really interesting. It was done during COVID, and that was presented some challenges. But the final mix, we were able to be in the same room for, and it was very interesting. The post production was very, very interesting as well in the image, because the movie was shot in two sort of rounds because of financing. So we shot, I would say, about 70% of the film in late 2017 and about 30% of the film at the beginning of 2019. So throughout that process, I was editing and showing cuts to the producers and to friends, more like assemblies or more like ideas of, this is what I want the film to be. And then by 2020, when COVID hit, it was time to lock it. So at that point, I figured we needed sort of an external look at things. And we decided to bring in Fernando Epstein, who in turns, the great Fernando Epstein, who's a fantastic producer and editor, very famous in Latin America. And Fernando really liked the film, and he brought along his partner. Her name is Magdalena Shinka, Maggie Shinka, and they both didn't quite change a lot of the film, but really, really sculpted what was there to a new level of depth and a new level for me of trust in the cinematic form of like saying like, no, this is enough. This is, we are understanding what you want to be understood by the public, you have. And we can really just, if we can just trim here and there and reshape or remove structurally this thing here to there, the movie will grow. So it was a very long editing process, but very, very pleasurable because it had no pressure at any time. It was like finding and sculpting a beautiful piece of quiet intensity, which is, I guess, what I think we've done, and that makes us happy.
That is fantastic. Thank you for your generosity in like sharing all these
Oh,
like details about the way, like the film was made. So I guess
thank
I will
you.
we'll go back to like the last part of my question, like how, like what are you
Oh, I forgot.
expecting
Yeah.
in terms, what are you expecting now that people are going to start seeing it? Like how, I guess it's mostly how are you feeling about it?
Well, we're quite happy with the film. We're quite happy with the chances it takes and the narrative sort of challenges that it presents to an audience. I think if an audience member engages with the film is quite rewarding. But I think it could be challenging for our audiences. At the same time, I think her dilemma as a woman trapped who needs to liberate herself and sort of run away is something that sadly half the world goes through every single day. So I think we also trust that, particularly for women, it might be a film where they can find a strange but accurate representation of what they go through every day. So that's what we're going to hope in terms of communicating it to people, that it's a movie for women, particularly, and for film lovers, and that it's a movie about the need of living a life that's fulfilling and to not be trapped by anything, really. So we'll see if Ecuadorian audiences are ready to take that. We'll see.
Thank you so much. This
No, no,
has been a
thank you.
wonderful conversation. Thank you, everybody, for watching as well.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Goodbye.